Reserve. The root of all our evil, it begins with the Federal Reserve. Hey, yeah, well, let's go back in time when everybody was so proud of America.
I'm Tommy Salmons. This is Year Zero. Today, Cam Harless joins me. I had Cam on to talk about his sudden claim to fame with a silly-ass tweet and going on Fox News and all the shenanigans that were popping off because of this tweet. So this was just a little nice, fun, relaxed conversation. We had a good time. We recorded this like a week and a half ago, something like that. And now my dogs are climbing on me because I'm talking. But first, RyanBunting.com. For all of your graphic design needs, go to RyanBunting.com. Ryan Bunting is a great libertarian and a great anarcho-capitalist. He's also a very racist graphic designer. Go get your best racist graphic designs at RyanBunting.com, because RyanBunting.com for all of your hand job needs. RyanBunting.com. Go to Libertarianinstitute.org. The Libertarianinstitute.org is where you'll find this podcast, Scott Horton Show, Conflicts of Interest with Kyle Anzalone, Liberty Weekly with Patrick McFarland. My dog is fucking berserk right now. And Keith Knight, Don't Tread on Anyone. We also have some really great writers at the Libertarian Institute. At the libertarianinstitute.org, you'll find Jim Bovard, Kim Robinson, and sometimes me, but Patrick McFarland is definitely writing there as well. So go to the libertarianinstitute.org for all of your freedom takes and articles and podcasts and all that good stuff. And oh, can y'all hear this guy? Thank you, Tom Burton, for the music. Enjoy the show. All right, dude. So I'm here with Mr. Cam Harless, the man of the hour. How are you doing, dude?
I'm doing all right. I think the hour might be over, but I'm still trying to pull something out of it.
Maybe. We don't know. Somebody else might get fired. You got that?
Oh, that'd be so great.
What did I call it when I was talking to Ryan? I was bullshitting with we're planning a live stream. So the guy who does my music for my podcast, we're gonna do a live stream of him playing music, kind of like a little mini concert on Zoom, and we're gonna invite a bunch of people. And we were talking about it, and I was like, I told him, I said, I'm chatting with Cam Harless tonight, and he was like, oh, that's fucking awesome. And I was like, yeah, the tweet heard around the world. It does feel semi-revolutionary the way that it took off, the way that it was so, it penetrated everything in such a way, like you look at it on its surface. When I saw you tweet it, I liked it, and I just kind of moved on because I was like, oh, that's funny. And we just went on about our business. And then that was what, a Thursday or a Friday? And then
it was June 1st.
Yeah, and then it was like the next Monday because I had a couple of days off. And so I don't look at Twitter much on my days off, so I didn't know what was going on. It was a couple of days later, I saw Tim Pool talking about it. I was like, took a screenshot and sent it to you. I was like, what the fuck, dude? You're famous.
Dude, it's like so the tweet is an old joke, and I've said this from the beginning. It's so funny. I have these people throughout Twitter that I've never heard of before, like taking up for me when someone tweets that tweet now. Like, you need to credit the original author. And the whole time I've been like, it's from the 90s. I just heard it for the first time that day.
Jack Kerouac tweeted that the first time.
and so, like, from the beginning, I've been like, no, this is, I was in a group chat. I was hanging out with the boys. It was June 1st, which I think that's the secret sauce of this whole situation. Well, at least part of it. is it was the first day of Pride Month,
Uh,
right? And so, you know, there are a lot of people, and even I know gay people right now who are just not at all happy with Pride Month and the corporatizing of homosexuality, and, you know, they're just done with it. And so I think there are a lot of people on the planet who are like, okay, I'm done with that. And, you know, you see a joke that's, you know, in the it's the B from the LGBT. They're like, oh, you know, it's funny. It's Pride Month. That's funny. And I think that's what started it. Was it's a clever little joke. It's a little bit of wordplay, but it grew very quickly. And so I think when I hit about 1,000 likes on the thing, because I thought maybe I'd get 30, I went to my LinkedIn and I shut it down. Because I was like, I don't know what's happening here. I'm not about to get fired for this crap. But I shut it down so no one could find where I work, stuff like that. Which is funny. Like, we can get to the end of the story, which is hilarious to me. But so I shut it down, and then, you know, I start getting a few followers here and there. I think the beginning of that day, really, I think it took about 2 days for it to really take off. Like, the first day it got likes, but then obviously the Weigel situation changed things. But you know, I started getting a few followers here and there. I was like, oh man, I was at like maybe 1,069 followers, because I've been rebuilding from the time I got banned for asking Justin Trudeau if he'd consider eating shit and dying. And so I've been in a rebuild since then, and I got a few, and then Dave Weigel, who I'd never heard of before in my life. Same with Felicia Sonmez. I've never heard of this woman in my life. And he retweets it. She gets pissed off that he retweets this horribly offensive and sexist and misogynist joke, which I haven't said it yet. The joke is, you know, every girl is bi. You just have to figure out if it's polar or sexual. It's fun. I chuckled. It's a chuckler.
And that's kind of what I thought when I first saw it. I saw it. I liked it. I laughed, and I moved on. Like, it was
Right.
like, it was, and whenever I realized like what was happening, it was, like I said, it was like 2 or 3 days later. And I was like, what the fuck? And you're like, this weekend has been crazy. And I was like, what the fuck's been happening? I've been sitting in my yard getting drunk. Like, what the fuck's happening?
Yeah, so Dave Weigel retweets it. Felicia Sonmez, who there's all sorts of history with her. I've learned a lot since. But she gets mad. She's tweeting like a harpy. Bitch went crazy. And I get there's talk of Dave Weigel being suspended and all of this, and I'm like, that's hilarious, because when it started happening, when he first retweeted it, I don't know if you know Tet, right?
No.
Tetsui?
Nah.
Okay, well, he's if you know him kind of person on Twitter.
Okay.
But he was like, I'm so jealous of you right now, because that reporter might be fired because of retweeting something you tweeted. You shit posted a journalist to perhaps be fired. And I was
Now,
like, yeah, no.
up until I saw this, like, let me just explain my point of view. Up until I saw what the fuck was happening, I thought Pulpo had the best fucking trolls on fucking journalists. Right? Like, where he sends them fucking pictures of his nutsack underneath the
Right.
fucking stack of papers and shit. And so I'm just laughing, and I'm like, oh, like, there's nobody better troll on journalists than Pulpo. And then I see this, and I'm like, holy fuck, man.
Right.
This is like Bill Maher said. You made it on Bill Maher. Of all the... We live in the Twilight Zone, man. As Bill Maher said, it was a throwaway joke. If you don't like it, throw it away. Like, it wasn't... There was nothing really offensive about the joke. It was,
Right.
it was kind of like with my daughter. All right, so my kids caught the edge of this whole gender shit whenever they were growing up, and my 15-year-old son told me he was pansexual, and my daughter, which he's not, but my daughter. Well, it's obvious. I mean, you just meet him. It's obvious. It's like, all right, well. you're not out there fucking everything, so like we're good.
There are no furries in the house, so I'm okay with it.
Right. And my daughter told me she was bisexual, and the first thing I thought of was she was like 13 or 14 at the time. And I was like, yeah, if I'm bisexual too. And she was like, you are? I'm like, yeah, if I can't get it for free, I'll buy it. You know? It was one of those types of deals. Like, you just
Right.
kind of like, oh, yeah, you just say it to be kind of witty and just bullshitting and break the ice. It's not, you're not being serious in any way. So the way that the joke was taken was hilarious.
Yeah.
And like I said, my first thought was like, I thought El Popo was the only person that could troll journalists in this way.
Well, that's what's funny is because what the greatest thing about it was it gave me all of the inspiration I needed to just tweet out like bangers at these people and just make fun of them and have fun.
And you did, and it was awesome.
I mean, it just set me up, but I'll have to tell you about kind of like the weight of it because it's bizarre that how exhausting this can be.
I'm sure. Yeah.
But no, yeah. So I started getting some followers. Like I said, I closed down the LinkedIn because I don't want to be canceled. I have to pay for these children that I own. So Dave Weigel she started going crazy, and I made the statement, it's really weird to see someone else apologize for something you wrote. And then I started making my jokes, and I was talking about how, I'm suddenly an incel, because the interesting thing about this was a lot of times you'll get hate in the original tweet, but since she screenshotted it, and a lot of the people who were making their comments were cowards and wouldn't at me, like most of the hate I did not see unless I went and looked for it.
Right.
But I was called an incel. I was called all this stuff, and I was just having the time of my life. How do you call someone with 5 children an incel?
Yeah.
Like it's just wild. And this guy from
because you didn't have 5 abortions.
That's what they would have wanted.
Yeah. Exactly.
This guy from the Spectator messaged me, and he asked me if I would like to write an article about it, and I was like, okay, sure, yeah. And so like Saturday morning, after this all happened, I took 20 minutes, wrote an article, sent it to him, went and did my errands, and so they posted that, and it went around, and I got a lot of random people who I guess read the Spectator, and people who kind of noticed the hubbub. Coming in and talking to me about it, and then
the fucking article, Florida man write joke, you get mad, the end. Like, what the fuck kind of article do you want?
Right. Well, I mean, I'll have to send you because it's behind a freaking paywall for some reason. So I'll send you what I wrote.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'll put it in the show notes. Yeah.
But yeah, I'll send you the PDF that I saved.
Okay.
So later on, I don't know if it was that day or the next day, the dude messages me again and says, "Hey, do you want to go on Tucker?" And I was like,
"Are you fucking?
Are you asking me if you want me to go in front of 3.25 million people so they can hear my voice, see what I have to say, and I can drum up whatever I can to have people listen to my show, to do the things I want to do with my life, I was like, hell yeah. And I started, they wanted to do it.
I would have been like, I think you have the wrong number. That would have been my first thought. I'd be like, yeah, dude, I know you meant to message somebody else, but for some reason you messaged me again.
But yeah, so the suspension of Dave, because they suspended Dave Weigel for a month without pay. That was his punishment for retweeting my tweet. And so Tucker's people got my email, asked me to call them. I talked to them, and the girl was very nice, and she was like, okay, and I was thinking I would have to do this in my office like I normally do.
Right.
Like I just thought, oh well, they'll give me a link or something. And I was like, so what do I need? I've got the equipment to do this. I do a show. I can make this work. And they were like, oh no. We're gonna take you to a studio. And I was like, really? And they were like, yeah, where do you live? We'll find one nearby. And they ended up finding one in Tampa. And so they actually sent a limo company to pick me up.
Jesus.
It wasn't a limo. It was one of those black SUVs that, if you watch CIA videos, that's when people disappear from
Right,
streets. It was
right.
that kind of black SUV. And so it pulled up, and I'm like, am I going to be killed?
Like an Escalade or some shit.
Right.
It looks like
I
the
was like, am I about to
FBI
be
just pulled
murdered?
up to your house.
I was like, this is when I die. But yeah, like I think at that point, by the time that I'd written the article and I'd done this, I'd gained like 3 times the followers I had on Twitter already.
No shit.
Like I think at that point it was like, I don't know, 3,000 something followers probably. And so I after I got home, I did all of that, and they came and they picked me up. The guy drove me, and he was Palestinian. And so I was just curious. I was like, what do you think's the solution?
Oh, I thought you said, how did a terrorist get a job with Fox News?
Right. Right. But no, I was just like, because he was very talkative, and I just asked him, like, what do you think the solution is with Israel and Palestine? He was like, I don't think it's time for a solution. He said, I think it's time for people to realize that there's a problem there. And I don't think that the Israelis realize there's a problem. And he goes, I don't think the Palestinians necessarily realize there's a problem. I was like, yeah, that makes sense. And he goes, what do you think? And I was like, oh, I'm American. Like, I don't want, I have no idea what your culture's like. Like, I'm not going to tell you what the solution in your part of the world is, because I have no idea how you relate to each other at all. Who am I to say, oh, a
Right.
2-state solution? Oh, with this, who am I? And he goes, oh my God. And I was like, what? And he goes, that's the best answer an American could give. And I was like, oh, cool.
What do I think? Here's what I think the solution is. It's none of my goddamn business.
Right. And that's what like, how is this on me? But he goes,
Figure it out. Call George Bush. I don't know.
But yeah, I think I'd said something about war and something else. And he goes, have you heard of antiwar.com? And I was like,
No shit.
yeah. I mean, and I was like, yeah, I mean, I've met and I know, I've talked to Scott Horton several times. He goes, I don't know who. He goes, who? And I was like, Scott Horton? And he goes, no, who's the other guy? He's really good. What's his name? And I was like, Justin Raimondo? He goes, I love Justin Raimondo. And so, we're having this, and we talked about Ron Paul at that point because, Raimondo worked with Ron Paul.
Right.
And, we kind of talked about that for a bit. And that dude, on the way there, just talked to me, and he found my YouTube channel. He did all of this stuff and started following me every way he could. And we get into the Tucker studio, and I was supposed to have a makeup artist, but it didn't show up, so I didn't have to wear makeup, thank God. And I had to look into like a camera lens. There was no video of me looking at Tucker. So there was I couldn't tell what he was doing, or, I could only hear him out of one ear. I do the show. I slip in some, I found out earlier that day that Dave Weigel was for the Iraq war and had sabotaged a anti-war protest back in the day. And so, my joke is, well, fuck that guy. I'm glad he got, what's the word? Suspended.
Yeah,
And
which was
so
funny. Which was funny. It made me laugh. I was like, all right, yeah, fuck that guy.
And it was just crazy. So I got to talk about being anti-war on Tucker Carlson to all of the Republicans.
Because of a
like,
fucking joke.
Yeah. And on it, because Matt, the guy who from Spectator, called me a comedian, which he's not wrong, but I'm just not like a stand-up comedian.
Everybody's been calling you comedian. Everybody I hear talk about you has been calling you a comedian.
Yeah.
Which I find odd, because I'm like,
right.
Well,
because I don't call myself that.
Well, you and I have followed 3 different accounts of each other, because we've both been like kicked off Twitter a couple of times. It's like, all right, I like Cam. He's funny. He's got a great sense of humor. But I don't consider him a comedian. I don't think that's what he does. But I thought it was really interesting the way that you attacked, you came at the subject when you were on Tucker. I really wanted to compliment you on that. And I held it for this because I wanted to give it to you straight up. the fact that you were able to leverage like the time that you were given, which I mean, what 3-4 minutes you were on, you your immediate reaction was like, how do I turn this into my message?
Right.
And I like that. Like you did a great job of that. Like
Yeah.
where I don't care what Tucker wants to ask me. I want to make this my message and what I have to say. And I thought it was a really like great way of approaching the entire insanity around you at that moment.
Yeah. Well, and thank you. I really appreciate that. And it was wild. And like I said, I was looking into a camera lens, and so I ended up touching my face and having nervous habits that I haven't done in a while because I'm used to doing a show and seeing the other person. And so I was like, but I get off. I'm done with this conversation with Tucker. By the way, here's a little insider thing. Earlier in the day, they go, hey, Tucker wants to talk to you about your article and about the tweet, but he also wants to talk to you about some other stuff. What would you like to talk about? And so I said that I wanted to, because this ironic thing that I make this joke, which has nothing to do with the press, which has nothing to do with, which is something I've railed against on the Propaganda Report, on my own show. Like I hate on journalists constantly. Like, you know, it's
right.
But this joke is what does it. And it's just weird and surprising. But I get out of the chair, and my phone's in my pocket. I'd looked at Twitter before. I'd had some growing followers or whatever. I may have overshot it because I think at that point I was maybe at 2,000. But I get off Tucker. Oh wait, that's what I was saying. I'm so sorry. I'm sorry.
My bad, man. I
No,
interrupted you. I just wanted to.
So they asked me.
Like I should tell you the way I saw things.
No, you're good. No, you're good. It was all my ADHD brain. But they asked me what I wanted to talk about, and I said I want to talk about how distrust in the corporate media is a good thing, and how this situation highlights how bad these people are, and how you can show you who you can trust and who you can't, and this discredits them. And I told her that I wanted to talk about one of the good things about Twitter and about the internet at this point is it outpaces the propagandists. And I think I used spinners just to kind of be Fox safe. You can outpace the spinners in order to break down their narrative before they can even figure it out. And I told them that's what I wanted to talk about. And so I didn't think it was going to be 90 seconds of me talking to Tucker, because they asked me, what else do you want to talk about? And I genuinely believe, I don't think he was like rude or cut me off, but I think the fact that I went where I went as quickly as I did made him nervous. I think he was going to talk to me longer, and instead he said goodbye and had his little, because after that he did a monologue again.
Yeah.
So I think I may have scared him a little bit, and I like that idea.
I would hope so. I would hope that any of us that do this, that get on and put these ideas out there, whether you call yourself a libertarian or not, would scare these people a little bit, because our ideas are supposed to be radical compared to what they're putting out there. And if we're not fulfilling that, if we're not scaring them a little bit about the way that we approach these things, we're not doing our jobs right.
Yeah. No. Well, and that's the thing, like between this and other things, the way I think about these things, like my family's never fully happy with me because I'm too radical for them. So I was not surprised by this. But I get out of the chair. I'd been on Twitter before the show. I put it in my pocket. As soon as I got out of that chair, I opened up Twitter. And I'm not exaggerating when I say it took me 20 minutes to scroll up in my notifications to the top.
Jeez.
Like full on, I was sitting in the back of that thing, and the driver was trying to talk to me again. I talked to him for a little bit. But I looked down, and we were halfway home. And I was like, I can't believe it took that long. And so I think at this point I'm at like near 6,800 followers from 1,068.
Right.
just exponential and crazy. And like there was one girl that tweeted at me. The one girl wrote an article about me and called me her spirit animal. This other girl tweeted at me asking if I wanted a second wife, and like I had all this weird stuff going on. But I thought I thought like after that had happened, like the day or so after, I was like, okay, the 15 minutes are up. I can calm down, because I don't know if you've ever had to be on for a long time. Like when I say on is, I tell jokes, I do comedy in other ways other than stand up. But in order
But you
to
have
be
real
on,
life. There's real life
right,
around you. You still have responsibilities you got to take care of, and there are other aspects of your life that you deal with. So it's kind of like coming on a pod. It'd be like being on the podcast for 24 hours, like constantly. Like that's all you're doing. And it's like, no, I come on here. I'm on here for an hour or 2 hours, and you could talk to anybody that knows me outside the podcast, that's been on the podcast or listens to the podcast. I'm the same person outside the podcast than I am on the podcast, but there's a certain amount of relaxation you experience when you're not doing it.
Yeah.
You're
Well, it's
like, there's like job mode. There's like this mode you go into. Like, it's like, I got to go now.
Right. Well, and it's like on our show, like I'm doing all of the, because we do it live. And so, I'm doing all the button pushing. I'm doing all of the directing of the conversation. And so, like, I'm having a conversation, but I'm also trying to plan where we go next and get to the end.
Right.
Like, there is a lot to that. But with this situation, I had to be in comedy mode and be able to see a tweet that someone wrote and probably see a couple of bad jokes and try to find the spin that makes it funny. And so, like, I'm in that headspace and trying to go, and there's, the dopamine is going up and the adrenaline's going up at certain points, because I'm like, am I going to lose my fucking job? Are they going to find out about this? I almost had a heart attack when I saw my news alert, because I have my name in a Google news alert that I get emails from, just to see if anyone mentions me, because I've had some weird people say weird stuff in the past, and I just like to know what's going on.
Right.
Those emails were full, and I ended up getting like 2 of them per day that were full with articles with my name in it. And I was just like, when I saw one, because the company I work for is based out of Australia, when I saw an Australian media article and a video about me, I was like, oh shit. But I thought it was over. I thought after doing all of this, making my jokes, just taking shots at people, I thought it was done. I was like, everything's more placid today. I'm just going to relax. And it was literally 2 hours later, Felicia Sonmez gets fired because she had this whole thing
over again.
Yeah, and he just jumped back up, and I was like, okay, let's do it.
And then what your joke was on what, a Thursday or a Friday, after Bill Maher's crew had already written his skit for that week. So you didn't even make it onto his skit until the next week. So it just drags it on. Everything's just dragging on. How is your wife dealing with this?
Well, she was like, I don't understand why you do some of the things that you do, Cam. She's like,
I knew it was a funny joke. Come on, wife.
Well, she was like, it seems to be that the women are slightly more, I wouldn't say level-headed, but like they're worried about things more than us. And so me going, yeah, I'll go on Tucker. Yeah, I'll do this. Yeah, is not how she would have responded at all.
Right.
And so, she was a little worried. But what's funny, and I'll tell my boss, like maybe a week and a half, 2 weeks before, the last time I spoke with her before this situation happened, she had told me that they had found my podcast when I was in the interview process, and she watched 5 episodes of it. Some other people watched episodes of it, and they were like really worried about hiring me at first, because they were like, could he get canceled? Could he mess us up? Could he be a bad face for the company? And she was telling me this, and she said that she talked to one of the founders after all of it, and she said, this is what some of the people are worried about. And he said, no, fuck it. We're not going to worry about that kind of shit, and just hire him. If he's good for the job, hire him. And so she had told me this like a week and a half before.
Oh, wow.
And I was like, okay, hope you hold to that. But she found out on her own by someone screenshotting my tweet from the Bill Maher thing when I shared the video, and was like, "Is that you? Is this? Did you?" And I was like, "Yeah, here's the videos." And she was like, "Wow, it's really ironic we had that conversation." And I was like, "Yeah, it really is. Am I good?" And she's like, "No, you're good. That's fine. This is hilarious." Like, thank God, thank God.
Yeah. Yeah.
But
No doubt. No doubt.
but that's what was crazy. Like, I was mentioned by Bill Maher. My face was seen on The View. I was on his Siraj. He talked about it. Tim Pool talked about it.
Kyle Kalinske talked about it.
I didn't know that one.
Yeah, you were all over the place, dude. I just sent
was-
you the Tim Pool screenshot when I first saw it because I thought it was funny, and then after that, it was like everywhere. It
Yeah.
was. I was like, holy shit! Like, because you're like,
what's-
oh yeah, this. Like, I didn't even realize what was going on. I honestly, like I said, I don't pay attention to Twitter very much whenever I'm not working. It's kind of like something I do when I have a little downtime. I just kind of at work, I'll just look at Twitter and I'll jack around on Twitter. And so when I sent you that message, that was like a Monday.
Yeah.
And you were like, "Yeah, it's been a wild weekend." And I'm like, "What are you talking about?" And then like I didn't even realize that. I was like, "Oh shit." Cuz it was every fucking where. And I was like,
Yeah.
"Oh fuck. Okay. I know what he's talking about now."
Dude, and what's so cool about it, and I've had a couple of people tell me this, because I wouldn't say it myself, but I'll repeat it because, you know, I'm at least that confident. But they were like, "I don't think this could have happened to a better person." And I was like, "What do you mean?" And they were like, "Well, first off, you hate the press, so you love. It's like you could cackle from the sidelines about journalists getting fired, and it's like coming from a genuine place. Like,
Right.
how does that happen? What's this magic in the universe where this comes from a stupid joke tweet? You know what I mean?" And I was like, "Yeah, I guess so." And my friend goes, you know what the reason that you are part of this conversation still, and why Bill Maher directly quoted you from the article that you wrote." And I was like, why? And he goes, "Have you ever seen one?" Because people have been fired for retweets before. He goes, "Have you ever heard or seen them respond to the situation at hand ever?" And I was like, "Well, no, usually they delete the tweet to get away from it, or some people delete their accounts." And because I've seen this happen before. And he goes, "You leaned into it. The rest of them didn't." Like he goes, "I've never been prouder of you for just being the dick that you are."
Well, so this is why I asked about your wife, because I know my wife. Like, she would have been like, she's, you know, when you're married to somebody, you have like this relationship with them that's like totally different than the relationship you have with anybody else.
Yeah.
And it cracks me up because I can have a person approach me and be like, "Oh my God, it's Tommy. I recognize your voice." And then my wife is like, "Shut up, motherfucker, and get to work. You know, like, do the dishes, do something." Like, you know, like, and so I know that your wife was like not buying into all the bullshit. Like,
Right.
she was like, she's like, "Yeah, I still know who the fuck you are, and you still have responsibilities."
Yeah. Get the work to. She was like, "Get off the phone. I want to talk to you right now." And I'm like, "You don't understand." And she's like, "I understand. Put the phone down." So
I understand
had
you need to put the fucking phone down. Like,
And I'm just like, yeah, but no, she's been doing fine. She's really great because even though she doesn't necessarily get all of the things that I do or say, we have good conversations. She's on the same page with me most of the time. But she's like, she knows that with like the show and Twitter and stuff like that, that I'm like creating something.
right.
And she does creative stuff. She like draws and paints and does stuff like that. So I'm like, that's my version of what you do. And she's like, "No,
Right.
I understand it." So she's great, but it was like, I can't tell you how tired I was
Oh, I imagine.
after the Tucker thing. And I thought it was all calmed down. It was like the adrenaline went down, the dopamine went down, and I was just like starting to flatline. And it was like, oh, I can't, I want to go. I think one day I called in sick to work one day because I didn't wake up in time because I was just like, "Brr." And then Felicia Sonmez gets fired, and I was like, let's do it, baby.
Let's go.
Let's go.
Did I don't know. I don't know if you have the same situation as me. My wife is completely apolitical though. She just didn't give a. She couldn't give two fucks about politics. She didn't care. So I talk about all this stuff on the podcast. Like people find this like even other podcasters they find this odd that I don't talk about this stuff anywhere else. This is where I talk. Yeah. Like the podcast is where I do all this stuff. I might bring something up to my wife, and if I run into a conundrum that I'm like, okay, does this make sense?
Yeah.
You know, when I'm trying to like connect dots or something, I might ask her just to get out another point of view. But my wife didn't give a fuck about this podcast. Like she wants me to make sure. She wants to make sure I feed the chickens. You know, like I water the goddamn crops. Like
right.
She's like, I don't give a shit about your podcast.
See, I can tell you that my wife does not watch or listen to my show. Yeah. And it's not because she doesn't love me or doesn't care what I have to say. It's probably because when I very first started, I was too insecure about it, and I was like, don't listen. And she just hasn't started, kind of thing. But you know, I think in some ways she's more of a conspiracy theorist than I am, but she is mostly not political. And I don't talk about politics outside of I barely talk about it on my show. Like, I think most of the time it happens, it's just with people that I met on Twitter or on Facebook.
It just happens to come up in the conversation. Yeah.
Right. So I don't talk about that stuff. You're more likely to hear me like talking about different theological concepts that I'm like wrestling with because I find it so fascinating.
Yeah, I just recorded with Buck Johnson 2 nights ago, and we were discussing the book Nihilism by Father Seraphim Rose, and it's just like the critique of liberalism that he lays forward. It's like, okay, this is hard to like counter, let's talk about this. Because Buck is, I consider myself agnostic, but I love reading like on religion and getting into, I really have found myself interested in the Orthodox faith because it's so different, I guess, because I grew up Baptist. It's such a different thing than what I understood religion to be. So it's really intriguing to me. And Buck has converted to Orthodox. So I was like, this will be an interesting conversation. Like, we can have this conversation. And so, yeah, like these conversations where you're getting into these more philosophical, deeper kind of meaning discussions, like they can change the way you see things altogether.
Yeah, I mean, there have been a couple of books and things that I've read in the last year or two that have shifted my paradigm in huge ways. Like one of them was there's an author, Dr. Michael Heiser, who wrote a book called The Unseen Realm, and it talks about the little part in Genesis 6 where it talks about the sons of God and how they took wives of the daughters of men, and the Nephilim were born.
Oh, the Nephilim, yeah.
He talks about that kind of thing, and I read that, and I was just like, well, that it opened. Even if I read Genesis and didn't believe that that's what happened, it opened up windows to understanding those people in that time and how they thought.
Right.
And I really appreciate stuff like that. By the way, we're having I think the week after next. So this next week we have Monica coming back on the show. But right after that, we have Justin Marler coming on the show. Have you ever heard of Justin Marler?
No, I haven't.
Have you ever? I don't know if you're into metal music.
Absolutely.
I shaved my head so I don't get it as much as I used to. I'm not a metalhead, and I never really was. Like I always went more towards like folk crap and alternative rock and punk. That was kind of where my brain was. But Justin Marler helped start a band called Sleep. I don't know if you've heard of Sleep.
Yes. I love Sleep. It's one of my favorite bands of all times.
It's my wife's favorite band. So he started, he helped start Sleep, and right before they started getting famous, Justin left the band, and he went and started and lived at at a Orthodox monastery and became an Orthodox monk for 8 years.
Oh, Jesus.
So his life completely, he left sleep. He did the first album with them, and then he left and became an Orthodox monk.
Holy shit. I want to talk
Such
to
a
this
crazy
guy.
story.
I don't even
And
have to
so-
record it. I just want to talk to the guy. I don't care if we
Right.
record it.
But and if you're, I was just saying, you know, Jessica is Orthodox. I was raised like charismatic, so I was raised with the fun Christians that do crazy stuff.
Yeah.
But I wasn't in the actual crazy ones. I was in the more, I wouldn't say moderate, because that's a dumb description of it, but you know, kind of in that realm of it. But I have a degree in biblical studies, and I like to read, and a lot of what I read about and what I'm wrestling with now, in a lot of ways, is the Second Temple period, like Judaism in the second Temple period, because that was where Jesus was. And so a lot of the stuff he talked about, a lot of the stuff the apostles talked about, understanding that period helps you understand the whole Bible more. And so right now I'm reading a book on ancient cosmology, which is fascinating and has shifted my view on Genesis completely, the way I think about it. There's so much good stuff. But yeah, if you're interested in the Orthodox stuff, Justin's going to be on our show, not next week, but the week after.
Oh, I'm stoked. I'm definitely listening to that.
That'll be one to catch, because
Definitely listening to that.
and he wrote a book. I want to say it was called Youth of the Apocalypse or something like that. And he had a zine that he made and one of the big things that he was fighting against as a monk, being in the age range he was, and what he did with music was helping people not commit suicide.
Oh, wow.
Like, that was one of his things. And so he's also done punk covers of hymns that he has out on iTunes and stuff. It's wild. But yeah, that'll be a lot of fun. And that's what I love about our show now. Excuse me. Because before we did the libertarian thing, and I got bored. And there are a lot of people who don't get bored in this space, and that's great. But it was like when I was saying something and then hearing everyone else say essentially the same thing, I was like, what am I adding?
Right.
Am I adding a unique voice? Am I adding something that people need to hear, or am I just adding to the noise?
Right.
And I got tired of it, and I think this was before we started recording, but I started writing a book. I was like, I'm going to write a book. I'm going to write about what I'm thinking about, what I've learned. I'm going to work on this idea. And as I wrote the introduction, in the introduction, I quoted Jack Kerouac, who was an old beat poet. He wrote a book called On the Road, and in that book, there's this poem.
One of my favorite books of all time.
There's this poem, and it was something that I heard years ago, and it always is in my head. I have it memorized, and so it's the I say I have it memorized. Watch me blank on it. But the poem is, the only people for me are the mad ones, the ones who are mad to live, mad to talk, mad to be saved, desirous of everything at the same time, the ones who never yawn or say a commonplace thing, but burn, burn, burn like fabulous yellow Roman candles exploding like spiders across the stars. And I love that. Like, that resonated with me as a human being for so long. And I'm writing this introduction, and I put these different pieces from that in there. And I'm sitting there. The show's called Make Liberty Great Again. It was from 2016. It was tongue in cheek against kind of the Trump stuff, kind of the paradigm we were in then. And I was like, I'm tired. I want to do something different. And Jessica had been on, I think, 5 or 6 times at that point. And I just messaged her. And I said, I just sent her the picture of the logo that I made, because I just immediately made a logo.
Right.
And sent her that, and she was like, what is that? I was like, that's our new logo. And she was like, are you asking if I want to come on full time on your show? And I was like, yeah. And she was like, I was going to ask you about that, because I was talking to a friend who makes music, and I was like, I want to use this guy's music in a podcast, and I kind of want to be a part of what you're doing now. And it was just funny, because it just turned like that. We had I learned how to do certain things in After Effects. I made the intro and the outro in video form. I'd really pushed into the streaming space, and it was just it was exciting to do it again. Because I was like, I can talk, and we still did libertarian stuff, I think up until episode 100, which we kept the old numbering device, because why would I get rid of that whole, catalog of crap that I've done? But we decided we wanted to move on from the libertarian space, and part of it was because we were supposed to have a guy named Shannon Ainsley on the show, and the only reason I wanted to talk to him is he, on camera, was attacked by 2 great white sharks at the same time and survived. And I was like, how do I talk to him about libertarianism?
Yeah.
I can't. Yeah. I don't want to.
I want to talk to him about surviving great white shark.
Right. I was like, I feel like with this name, with what we're doing, I can't do that anymore. And so we've talked to an exorcist. We've talked to an embalmer. We've talked to a pirate historian. We've talked to theologians. We've done all of this stuff, and it's so much better. And it's been great because I got all these followers on Twitter from tweeting a joke and being quoted by Bill Maher and Tucker Carlson laughing hysterically on a show, and everyone who knows him is like, that's like the gold star. He's usually used to talking to dumb people.
Right.
And so if you walk in there and you're smart and you make a joke and you make him laugh immediately, and you made him laugh a couple times, that's great.
Right,
you were top 1% of his guests. And I was like, thank you. I'm finally feeling like I'm doing something with my dumb voice.
Well, no, I mean, it's good because like I like your show. Like, I think your show is interesting. It's kind of quirky at times, like, not, and that, I don't mean that as an insult, but it's just a little quirky at times, and I'm like, all right, I'm not sure where they're going with that, but you always tie it all together at the end and kind of get it all. And I'm horrible about listening to other podcasts. I am. Yeah. That's not what I do. I read a lot. I don't listen to a lot of other podcasts because I don't. It's kind of like the old adage that comedians would always say. I don't watch a lot of stand-up comedy because I don't want to end up sounding like another stand-up comedian. And right. So I don't listen to a lot of podcasts because I don't want those podcasts to influence my style. Like, right. And I can tell that y'all aren't influenced by other podcasts. You're doing your own thing, and I think that's really cool and really interesting. And y'all have some really interesting conversations. I think the majority of the ones I've listened to that you've done are with Monica. And that's just because I know who she is. Yeah. Like, even though I didn't know her personally, I knew who she was. I knew where she was coming from. I kind of had an idea of what I was going to get into and the kind of topics. So I'm more of a topical person. Yeah. So I would wait until I saw something, but I do see your podcast all the time, and you have some great art, and y'all, I can tell y'all are putting a lot of work into it, and I'm like, okay, I like these guys. And plus, like I said, you and I have been following each other back and forth for like 3 years now, 4 years, whatever it is. It's been a while. And it's always been like, oh yeah, I got to get you on the show. Like, we got to do this. Yeah. We got to sit down and chat. Like, I like you. I think you're a good dude. So it's like, all right. So when you're seeking out, here's something I've always had issues with. When you're seeking out new subjects, how do you find them? Because I always have issues. It's like, for me, it's like, I stumble on them in a book. I see a phrase that sticks out, and I just go look up that phrase, and I start going down that rabbit hole. And it's just like, that's how I figure things out.
So it's one of the best tools that I've found in recent days has been TikTok. And TikTok is weird, and I post a little bit on there, but for the most part, I'm there to scroll through and find things. So there have been many of our guests in the last 6 months that came from TikTok.
Yeah.
From me finding someone on TikTok. Last night we talked to a guy named Ciaran Warner, who is an alternative media journalist, and he's trying to take down a cult. and I found his TikTok, listened to like the way that it's so fascinating, and we put it in the show last night. But the way that he tried to get the FBI to pay attention to this cult was he called the FBI and threatened to murder Mitch McConnell. Like, what a wild thing to do. He was trying to get them to take his hard drives so they would look into all of this stuff and finally do something about this cult. And I found him on TikTok.
So did he get arrested? Like, what happened?
He talked about it a little bit last night, but he did have to go and talk to the Secret Service, but they kind of knew what he was trying to do. So it was a conversation with the Secret Service, and that was it. He said he'd cleaned his house and he'd done all these different things. Like in the call, in the call,
like Santa Claus is showing up.
He thought he might be swatted. But he said when the Mitch McConnell thing wasn't really working for him, he was like, I have weed in my house. I'm going to sell it to school kids. Like it's a funny call, but that's what he was trying to do. And it's just fascinating. So a lot of times, some of our shows are like biblical theological stuff, and a lot of that comes from whatever I'm reading. And I happen to have a little network of theologians that I know through, because one of the things that I did early on, or several years ago, I think it's been probably up to a decade that I've been thinking about this and talking about this, but I changed my mind about what the Bible says about hell. And so I ended up being in a group with a lot of those people, and so I can just talk to them and say, hey, who do you know that's good on this subject? And a lot of times they'll make a connection there.
That's an interesting subject too. There's a lot of different pathways to go down with that.
Yeah. Well, and that we did an episode with a guy named Chris Date, who runs a website, rethinkinghell.com. And we talked to, he was it's hard because sometimes when you're having conversations, like my job is to make it a good conversation, to make it fun for everyone who's listening, make it fun for myself. Like that has to be kind of my rubric because I don't know what anyone else is thinking.
Right.
And so he was very like on point and he like talking to a dictionary. We've had a couple people like that. And the only reason I didn't like take off the episode is because the information was so good that it needed to be out there.
Right.
But I can't tell you how much I love running into someone who I can have these deep conversations with and then throw in a dick joke and we go from there.
Yeah.
Like there's always the room for the free form. But yeah, so little networks of people, which, I'm in like if I want to talk about like the soul or something like that, I'm in a biblical anthropology group on Facebook. I have the Hell group. TikTok has been great. Instagram, but a lot of it's just Googling. And I think the hardest thing is I announce my next month. I have the next 4 weeks planned always. And so if you watch to the end of the episode, you always see my announcement video, and it has all the next 4 people that are going to be on the show. And so, since we started
know what
calling
I'm doing next week, let alone the next month.
Yeah, no, and that's the thing. Before we became the Mad Ones, that was what it was like. I was like, the day of, I was like, what am I going to do? Am I going to have to go on alone? And so I put that in there so that I could have the next month, and so that I'd have to challenge myself to have this done by this point. And so right now I'm working on filling out August. And so I need to get that month filled. And one of the things that we've done recently is we did it with Brad several times, Brad Binkley from the Propaganda Report. We had him at the last episode of like a couple of months because we have these topics and we want to be able to have an episode at the end that I don't have to find some hugely interesting topic to talk about because it's hard to do that.
It's a lot of work.
It's hard to think up these things. And
people
especially
don't understand. People don't understand like the amount of work that goes into podcasting. Like honestly, I sometimes because there will be weeks I release like 2 episodes a week, and because I've just like had all this stuff going through my head, and I get a hold of a couple of people, and it works out to where I can maneuver it to where everything works out, and then you'll get 1 episode for and then you won't get an episode for 2 or 3 weeks. And it's like,
Yeah.
sometimes it's hard to like really work everything out, find those people and that you want to have that conversation with, and then put it out there. I've recorded, I don't know how many episodes you've recorded and you haven't released, but I've recorded, I think 2 or 3 since 2018 that I haven't even released because I was like, this isn't right, or for whatever reason. There was just something about it. There was one particular instance where it was the guest, and then there was another particular instance where it was just like, I don't know if this is any more than just 2 guys having a conversation, and if anybody would find it interesting. You know, like there are those times where you're just like, yeah, I'm not sure what I'm going to do with this. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it was so of the ones that I haven't released, I think that there are 3. One of them was my first time talking to Eric July because the audio he sent me didn't work. And so I couldn't release that. I only had me and my friend talking. But then there was one episode that I did with a couple of friends of mine, and they essentially kind of took over the conversation in the show, which had never happened before. And it was all like, I'm like, this isn't interesting. And that's part of why, because I just sat back and was like, this isn't interesting. It was so funny because one of the guys at the end was like, hey, you know what? I think it's time we can wrap up the show. And I was like, okay, yeah. Do you want to do it? Go ahead. I'm not publishing this anyway. And he goes, wait, really? And I was like, dude, you guys just had the most boring conversation I've ever heard in my life. I'm not putting this out there.
Nobody wants to hear this.
If I'm not interested, I can't put it out there. And the other one that I didn't let stay, because a lot of them are live, was do you know Allie on Twitter? She's always getting in fights with people. It was,
I don't think so. I
well,
kind of know my in group, and that's kind of all the only people I know.
Well, I had a couple of friends from a different group, and I had been sent some edibles, and I took some edibles at the beginning of the episode just to see, you know, because I thought it'll be funny to watch me devolve as time goes on. Right. And I'm sure it was for the first little while, but I checked out completely. Like I wasn't there. Like I was in another planet. I was on another planet, and it was so funny because and these are like episodes that I have that are like hidden behind like you can see it on Patreon or something, you know. Yeah. But I sat there and I wasn't really talking or moving or anything, and then Jessica, who didn't know how to do all the button pushing to get everything to work right, would just say, "Okay, Cam, it's time to say this part," and I would just like pop up, say it perfectly, and then go back to not. And I was like, no serious person wants to watch this. I'll keep this for the patrons.
Yeah, yeah. No, like I think it's on my computer. I have like a 5-hour conversation with the guy that I recorded. We were planning on releasing, and we just never released because I was like, I'm not sure this is going to have the effect that anybody wants. Right. This will go south very quickly if I release like all this shit we just talked about for the last 5 hours. You know.
Yeah, so and you mentioned like you don't really listen to a lot of other podcasts. And when I was in the libertarian space and when I was in the news space in particular, I didn't listen to anything. Like I didn't listen to any, because for the same reason, I don't want my thoughts and my arguments to be from someone else's mouth. And part of that was because someone who had obviously never listened to the show before claimed that I just repeated Michael Malice. And it annoyed the hell out of me. And so that was when, even though I wasn't repeating Michael Malice, you know, I do like his thing about corporate media. I do like these little things. So I'd use these little keywords because I was like, these are great points.
Yeah, I like the way that he expresses this particular point. So I'm going to use that phraseology, like, to make my point.
Right.
Yeah.
And I'll cite him. I'll say, you know, this is what he said or whatever. But I got so frustrated with that person that I was like, I'm just not listening to anyone anymore. And so now I think the podcast, I'll listen to Two Bears, One Cave with Bert Kreischer and Tom Segura.
Yeah.
And I'll listen to the Bible Project podcast, and I'll listen to things Monica Perez does. But because I every now and then fill in on the Propaganda Report, so that's like my side gig occasionally. Now that she's not doing the Daily Show, it's weird though, because I'm like, I love you, Brad, but like, what's going on? How is Monica not here? She should be here. Yeah, no, I'm in the same boat, and so I also, like I said, there was a time when there was, if one podcast said something, you would then hear it trickle down to all the rest. And I was just like, I'm just hearing the same things.
Yeah, right.
So
right.
I think the best advice I ever heard from a podcaster came from Joe Rogan. And he had said, if the reason this is done well is because I'm having fun. I'm talking to my friends, and I know that I'm having fun. If I'm having fun, the audience is going to have fun with me. And so it sounds so egotistical in a sense, but if I'm having fun, I know that I'm going to put it out there because there are going to be people who are going to be there with me going, yes, I like this.
Yeah.
I've had some weird things happen, but none of the hard work I did mattered. It was a stupid 15-word joke that got me put on the map.
Okay, so I'm gonna take the counter argument. It was all the hard work that led to that joke. You had to learn to phrase things right. Like,
right.
You had to get there.
It was, but yeah, that's what it's just so ironic. Like, because I for a while I was known in the kind of libertarian community because I did red pills. Because like in my episodes about Waco, I had a three-part series about Waco, one about Ruby Ridge, and some other stuff, and that's how I know Monica, because she listened to my Ruby Ridge and Waco episodes and then shared them with the world. And so the first time I had her on my show was the first time I met her, because I didn't know who she was until she started putting my stuff out.
Did you know? Sorry to interrupt, but did you know Clive Doyle died?
I didn't.
Yeah, he just died. David Thibodeau texted my wife the other day. I think it was like a week and a half ago that Clive Doyle died.
Wow.
Yeah. So
bummer.
Not to bring down the like attitude of the show, but it just clicked that, hey, like, this did happen.
And let me tell you, that was the last time I did that Red Pill series was Waco, because I spent a month researching it and watching videos and doing all of this, and the dead kids were too much.
Oh yeah, no doubt.
Like, what? I can't do this.
We before I ever did an episode on Waco, actually, we actually went to Waco and went to Mount Carmel and hung out with David Thibodeau. Yeah,
I'd love to talk to him at some point. He's
a great guy. Really, really nice guy. I can get you in touch with him. He's a really nice guy. So it's much more, it's odd for me because, one of the guys that were killed at Waco, one of the ATF agents that was killed at Waco, went to high school with my mom.
Really?
Yeah. So it was, I remember like being in Dallas at that time and seeing what was going on and kind of hearing my parents' rhetoric. And, they were on the side of the state, they didn't know any better, but, and seeing it and not understanding really, like, why are you trying to kill these people? Like, what's going on? Yeah. And then getting outside of it and learning the story. And, I remember when Pete had interviewed, David Thibodeau, my mom was like, "You're friends with Pete, right?" And I'm like, "Yeah." And she goes, Can you get David Thibodeau's email address?" And I was like, "Yeah, sure." And so I got it from Pete and I gave it to my mom, and she sent David Thibodeau an email about her perspective back when we were watching it happen as opposed to now, and the way that things changed, and just my entire, I guess my entire family kind of made a connection with David at that moment. And he's just a sweet guy, just a really great guy. Hey,
I've heard
he's a
everything
good
from him.
musician too. Like, so you like good music, you know, his music's good. So
Yeah, it's
he,
just what's
we went and hung out with him. He gave us CDs of his music, gave us CDs and all kinds of stuff of David Koresh, like preaching and just all kinds of
wow.
stuff, man. Just a nice guy, just a genuinely nice guy.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing. When I did that, like I said, it was depressing, and there were certain points of the story that just um, I didn't make certain judgment calls on because I was like, this doesn't make any sense. The official story, I didn't have anyone telling me yes or no that was a direct um, that was directly connected to it. So I just left these parts out, these little
Right.
parts that I couldn't verify out.
Right.
But no, I mean, I'd love to talk to Thibodeau at some point because that's an incredible place to have been, and like I mean, just wild. But yeah, no, it's just funny to me because I made those and I met Monica, who Pete knows as well.
Yeah.
And I met her simply because she listened to them with her son, and she messaged me and she said, "Hey, I've been on the propaganda report for years, and I've been doing my thing for years, but you're the one who red pilled my son."
Wow.
And I was like, "Oh shit,
Wow.
cool,
Yeah.
tight."
Yeah.
I'm never. She's pushing me because my plan was after the Waco episodes was to do an OKC series, talk about the Oklahoma City bombing.
You know, there at the Libertarian Institute, we have like this entire catalog that this guy has put together of all the research he's done on OKC over the years. You should definitely like be in touch with Scott about getting that guy on. I can't remember his name off the top of my head. Yeah, like there's here. Let's look it up. Why not? But yeah, there's an entire catalog at the Libertarian Institute on Oklahoma City, and
Well, and I did find it on Libertarian Institute after, because when I did those episodes, it was a couple years ago, and I'd messaged Scott and I was like, "Hey, where's the best place to find all of this information so that I can research it and do this story?" And he gave me, at that point it was on a website, but it was password protected, so he gave me a password to get in, and then I saw like 2,400 documents, and I was like, I'm tired from Waco. Maybe not, but Monica's always telling me, when are you gonna do OKC? I need you to do it. Because I didn't do it like a oh, here's all the facts. I wrote it in a narrative. So I wrote the story, put my opinion in, did all these different things. It's not at all unbiased, but it's an honest look at it. But she keeps pushing me, and I'm like, Monica, you got to pay me for this. I'm not doing this by myself.
do you know how exhausting this is? The guy's name is Richard Booth.
Richard Booth. I'm gonna write that down.
Richard Booth. And he works with the Institute now, and he archives everything he's found on the Oklahoma City bombing at the Libertarian Institute. So
Wow.
if you just Google Libertarian Institute Oklahoma City, it'll pull up everything.
Wow. Yeah, I need to get in there and do it. It's just like I said, I spent a month doing the Waco stuff, and I did it in under an hour. So it was like 20-minute episodes. But like reading through every single take on it, the official take, the stuff Jim Brevard had written, like all the different things that I could find, and just looking at it, and I was just like, it red pilled me more than I was already.
Right.
And I waited to watch that Waco show until after I'd finished writing it.
Right.
Because I didn't want to muddy my brain with Hollywood bullshit.
Right.
Which it was a good series, but it's
it was good. There was nothing wrong with it.
Had I watched that before, I would have accidentally put in stuff that wasn't true.
Right.
So I was like, I can't do that.
Yeah. Well, they're gonna add in their little quirks here and there. So
Right.
you just kind of have to accept that. But I thought it did justice.
Yeah,
I
it was
just
much better than I thought it would be.
right. Yeah, exactly. I don't think it painted a bad picture of anybody involved in this situation
Yeah,
unnecessarily. So I was like, all right, yeah, like whatever, because I did watch it. Actually, David actually sold us a copy of it. He was like, we have it, and we had to approve it. We signed off on it
right.
before it was released, and so I was like, yeah, I'll buy it from you before I buy it from anybody else. You
Right.
know? So yeah.
Well, he did consult it on it from
Yeah,
what I
yeah.
remember. So I was like, at
Well,
least
and
they
he's
have,
well, it was based off the book he wrote too. So he wrote a book about the entire situation, and so it was all based off the book he wrote.
yeah.
And so
Well, and also some FBI agents book too. Like it was
possibly,
2 books that they brought together or something.
possibly, yeah, that is possible. But I know that his book was involved in it, the book he wrote. So at least you got some perspective from
Right.
from their point of view. And
Well, that's
so-
what was. I think there was only like one point in that show where I was like, nope, no, damn you, no. Like, why are you? Oh, I know what it was. There's the scene with Janet Reno where I was like, she's being too kind in this. This is not who she was at this moment.
Oh,
Give
yeah,
me a
yeah.
break.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I think that was the only thing that I was like, being too nice. Stop it.
I watched it with my wife, like after we had met David, and she had read his book, and so we decided to sit down and watch it. And I think for the first like 45 minutes of that movie, she would interrupt every 30 seconds, going, "No, that's not right."
Right.
So it factually, like if you're looking at a timeline, it's not absolutely correct as to how it all happened, but
Yeah.
it's about as well as you can expect.
Yeah. They need to do. I mean, they did start it with Ruby Ridge, which is a very important part of that story. But someone needs to do a solid Ruby Ridge. I mean, I've done a short thing on it, but I mean like a movie or a TV show about Ruby Ridge.
Yeah.
Because that's one of the saddest stories.
Oh, it's horrible. It's terrible. Yeah.
Like, imagine that. Like, ugh.
Well, and between Ruby Ridge and Waco, man, there is nothing that gets my anarchist hackles up more. Like those 2 stories, it's like y'all, you got a lot of explaining to do, man. Like,
I think the only other stories that get my anarchist hackles up as well are Kelly Thomas and Daniel Shaver.
Daniel
The video
Shaver
of
for
Daniel
sure.
Shaver.
Oh my God. I remember watching that and I paused it and I had tears in my eyes. And I'm looking at my wife and I was like, that sounded like there's a moment in there where he's like begging. And I remember being a young father and my son sounding like that.
Yeah.
And I was like, fuck, man. Like, it did something to me that put me in a completely different place. Just watching a grown man grovel like that, and I don't mean that to be terrible, but that's what was going on. And it just put me in a spot where I was like, man, it was like listening to a 10-year-old.
Yeah.
It was, there was was Kelly Thomas the one that was begging for his mom where they were choking
Begging
him?
for his dad.
His
They
dad.
were beating him.
He was mentally handicapped, right?
Yeah, I believe he was schizophrenic.
Yeah, that one too. Yeah, you're right.
And I have 2 friends that live in what's the name of the place, Fullerton, who knew him.
Oh man.
And I'm like, I want to talk to you at some point, and they're like, we don't. And it was, but that's the thing. Since they knew him, they're like, I want his story out there, but if I tell it one more time, I can't tell it one more time.
Yeah.
And I was like, I'll respect that, but it's like that perspective, because I remember hearing that. I think he called out for his dad like 39 times or something. And I wasn't a dad when I heard the story.
Was that in Dallas?
It was in Fullerton, California.
Oh, okay. See, I got him confused with the guy in Dallas. There was a guy in Dallas that died very similar to George Floyd.
Okay.
And they were kneeling on his neck, and he was begging.
I remember seeing that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's like when you bring a grown man to that point, like there's when a 26-year-old man, like let's just take Daniel Shaver, a 26-year-old man, he's not in pain, he's just terrified.
Yeah.
It sounds like he sounded like a 10 or 11-year-old boy at that moment. That was painful. Like that was so disheartening. I can't watch that video. I remember when Thaddeus Russell interviewed his widow, and I emailed her, and when she responded back, I just got tears. I was just cried. That was just terrible. That's such a terrible situation.
Yeah, well, and that's the same thing is like my first realizing about cops was Kelly Thomas, and the fact, like I said, he called for his dad like 39 times, and he was beaten to a pulp. And I wasn't a dad at that point, but I was thinking of myself in his shoes, calling for my dad to protect me.
Yeah,
and it just like there are these little stories that are horrible and terrible. There are also good stories that do the same thing, but there are these horrible stories that you hear or see video of or see pictures of, and it just wrecks your worldview.
Yeah.
And in a good way. It changes it in a way that makes you need to be vigilant in things.
Yeah.
And I hate what's happened to all of these people, and if I could beat to death some of these cops who did it, I would probably do so. But at the end of the day, these are the stories that made me realize what the world was really like. And I'm not cynical. I'm optimistic. I'm one of those weird people out there who has hope, but I am grateful that I was able to find how the world is so that I know how to appropriately act against it. If that makes sense.
No, and I think you have like a really great perspective on how to approach these things. You're kind of like me. You're like, these people deserve nothing more than to be mocked and ridiculed. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And the more we can make that public, the better. And so that was like one of the more interesting aspects of what happened with you was they brought you right up to the front of the lines. It was like, okay. Yeah. And it's like, wow, he wasn't even ridiculing anybody that was worthy. Like what happened was so out of your hands, was so insane. It just made it so much more remarkable because you were like, yeah, like wait until I make fun of Keith Olbermann, but no, it didn't even get to that point. Like all you had to do was make fun of women in general, you know.
And I did make fun of Keith Olbermann recently too.
I think you did that today. I think I saw that today.
Maybe
it might have been yesterday, but I want to say it was today, and it deservedly so.
I forget I even forget what he said. I saw something, but it was, I think my favorite situation out of Twitter post that was I got a little bored because I'm just kind of in that same headspace, and so I was like, let's pull out some of the classics, and I've been doing some grammar trolling, and you incorrectly correct someone's grammar, and then you double down and you play that game, let them perform for you. And I got this one guy, and I was going at him on that, and his last name was Plotzker. And I don't know if you know Rebel with a Cause, Eric.
Yeah, I know Eric. I know Eric's at Childeberg every year. Of course, I know Eric.
But yeah, Eric said, that kind of sounds like another word for poop, and so that's my current goal. And every time I say poop now, I say Plotzker. My favorite,
It's like when I say pussy, I say Flynn.
But yeah, no. So like my favorite moment was my first Plotzker poop tweet, and because I replied to him, yeah, man, I took a mad Plotzker earlier, and someone I'd asked, like, what's something you did to better yourself today, and someone replied, I read your Plotzker tweet and laughed like an idiot. And I was like, hell yeah. And so I think my favorite tweet after that was, if your stool gets a little too loose, that's a wolf blitzer. So just having fun, man.
That's it, man. You got to we dig into heavy shit, and
yeah,
and some of the stuff we read and look at is really dark, and
yeah,
so you kind of got to keep it light at times, and just and it's hard sometimes. It's hard not to get irritated or take it personal or whatever, but at the same time, that's why there's several of us doing this, and so we can kind of keep each other in balance.
Yeah, well, and that's the thing. Like, I think there are a couple of things that were super freeing to me as a person, and one of the first ones was in 2016. I decided I wasn't going to argue with anyone online anymore, and I haven't. And I can't tell you how freeing it is, because I can just dismiss them or mock them and be done. But another thing was just realizing the absurdity of the world that we're living in right now. Because when you kind of grapple with that absurdity we're in, you're able to laugh at it, but also know what's going on and plan appropriately. And that's another freeing thing, is like, I can see all the horrible shit that happens, and I can still mock the evil guys. I can still get in there and make the jokes and provide levity, a little vacation for people who are depressed. And that's why at the end of every one of our shows, we ask people what's something that gives them hope, what's motivating them to carry on. Because it's like, we have enough doomer shit. Let's talk about what we can do to actually live a life we want to live.
Right. Yeah.
And so I don't know. I'm trying, man.
I don't want to keep you any longer. It's been an hour and a half. We've been fucking bullshitting around here and talking. There are some more serious subjects I would really like to dig into with you, and we'll coordinate on that in the future. But I think that
I was gonna say, like I told you, we're doing a friend at the end of different months for like the venting and talking about whatever they're interested in, or having them bring something or whatever. And so what's great about that is that leaves me open to talking to like the libertarian people that I love, the friends that I have. And so I'm covered through August, but maybe September we can hook up and you can come on the last episode of that.
I'll definitely come on. Anytime you want me on, I'll come on. All you gotta do is ask.
Awesome.
I'll find time. We'll do it. What, plug away, man, so everybody knows where to find you, because I want people to come listen to your stuff and see what you're doing.
Well, I really do appreciate that, and thank you for having me on. If you want to find me on Twitter, which is my favorite place on the internet because I get to make the jokes I want to make, and then maybe go on Tucker after I make them, that's at Harless. So that's just me.
Thank you, Elon Musk, for making that possible.
If you want to watch the show, we're on Rockfin Odyssey and YouTube. We're trying to build up to monetization on YouTube. We have enough subscribers, but we're trying to build watch hours now. So that's youtube.com/themadOnes. All of our everything is linked at our website, wearethemadOnes.com. But that's all that I think people need to know.
Yeah, I'll make sure I'll put at least your website. I'll put the website in the show notes, and everybody can come find whatever they want to find. And I'm looking forward to this episode you got coming up.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah.
I'm excited
Sleep.
about it, too.
Hell fucking yeah. Dragonaut, bitch. Man, fuck Tom Burton. I'm playing Dragonaut after this episode. Just kidding, Tom. I love you. Well, I hit the desk. The dogs are going crazy. I think somebody's at the door. All right. I'm going to stop the recording.
If you're gonna play scam, pick and choose, well, it's a game that was made for you to lose. It doesn't really matter how many times, it's the same old worn out stories, same old lines. They're all pointing dirty fingers in hypocrisy, bragging on their feats of mediocrity again. Never really making any kind of change, but they keep on getting re-elected, and I find that strange. And that's why I say fuck them, don't feed them, cause we don't even need them. I never celebrate the tyrants out of taking our freedoms. Yeah, I said fuck them, don't feed them, cause we don't even need them. I never celebrate the tyrants out of taking our freedoms. What's it gonna take for you to see that we're living in a rigged democracy? People stand in line for the things that they've been choosing, paying no attention to the rights they keep on losing. But they all gather in the rallies and they chant their names, on goddamn well that it's all gonna be the same. Just 4 more years of war and taxes, 4 more years of them grinding down their axes. And that's why I say fuck them, don't feed them, cause we don't even need them. I never celebrate the tyrants out of taking our freedoms. Yeah, fuck them, don't feed them, cause we don't even need them. I never celebrate the tyrants out of taking our freedoms.